"51-year-old John Lang was found barricaded inside his burning home.
I keep telling you.
Prior to his death, Lang gained social media attention by posting that he feared Fresno police were trying to kill him.
January 20th, 2016. A house in flames with one man inside, slowly bleeding to death on his own floor. This is the same man, John Lang, a police whistleblower from Fresno, California, who made a chilling Facebook post predicting his death just 4 days prior. This is an incident that absolutely shook the internet to its core and still has people investigating this strange case to this day. He was a local activist that was well liked in the community by his friends and neighbors, which is why many think that he was a target for the Fresno Police Department. In 2009, John was on a quest to expose his local police department for corruption and shady practices, and actively posted on the website called Fresno Bee. He was making claims that the local PD were targeting low-income neighborhoods by scanning shoppers' license plates while they were parked in the parking lot, and then waiting for the shopper to leave the store before pulling them over for violations that the police would find during their scans. John believed the Fresno PD were making millions of dollars a year in revenue for doing this. John claimed that this was a pattern of practice that is still being used to this day. Again, John was posting all this information on the Fresno Bee, which was a community website for Fresno, California. John wholeheartedly believed that a Fresno Bee employee by the name of Jody Murray was scanning the site and sending any negative posts involving the Fresno PD to an account by the name of HikerDude67 or HikerDude1967. Allegedly, John thought HikerDude67 was an alias for the Sheriff Sergeant of Fresno PD, Jared L. McCormick. John alleged that the IP addresses of any users on the website who were critical of the police department were sent to this officer. John would make a post that states, "Approximately in April or May of 2014, I received a call from a person to look at a jet ski that I placed on sale on Craigslist. 3 people showed up for this appointment. One had all the mannerisms and personality of a law enforcement person. He was tall with an average build and short cropped blonde hair, and based on his mannerism, I believe this person was Fresno Sheriff personnel. The other one, surprisingly, was Jody Murray. However, at the time, I did not realize he was Jody Murray. The third person was a younger male, slightly heavy-set, and riding a newer modern motorcycle." Through some of our research, we noticed that the Fresno Bee website worked with a third-party app for the comments section called Discus. This app allows whoever is in control of the site to gain access to any user's IP or email address. If what John claims is true, then Jody Murray could have 100% had access to this information and sent John's info from the site to the local sheriff. John felt that the police always knew the exact location where he was and were constantly following him. So the man came to the conclusion that the police department must have bugged his phones and put trackers on his car. Shortly after coming to this conclusion, in 2015, John would file a complaint with the Fresno PD's Internal Affairs Department for harassing him. But this didn't put an end to John's constant harassment from the very people that are meant to protect and serve him, as John felt the harassment just got more intense after the complaint was filed. For some, this may be a little hard to believe when you first hear it, but what if we told you that the Fresno Police Department has a long history of corruption and unlawful behavior?
Incredible allegations of corruption and racism have surfaced against the
Fresno Police Department.
and this time, The allegations come from
inside the department.
in what he describes as systemic racial discrimination and corruption. Officers, he alleges, are split along racial lines, with white officers enjoying preferential treatment in promotions
And minority officers facing harsher punishments for similar infractions.
Ruiz believes that the only way to address these issues effectively is through a federal investigation into the Department for Corruption
And racial discrimination.
Just not too long ago, in November of 2023, the Fresno Police Department and mayor were sued by a veteran Fresno cop, Lieutenant Ignacio Ruiz, and he accused the force of systematic racial discrimination and corruption. For just simply speaking out, Ruiz ended up facing unjust consequences of losing his badge and gun, and the threat of being let go of the force entirely. And just less than a year before John's tragic death, the Fresno Deputy Police Chief, Keith Foster, was involved in some suspicious crimes as well.
After rejecting a plea deal, the man who was once among the highest-ranking officers in the Fresno Police Department is now headed to prison for drug trafficking.
The former deputy chief was found guilty in May of conspiracy to traffic heroin and marijuana.
Keith Foster was the second highest ranking officer in one of the largest police departments in the state of California, and he was convicted of drug trafficking, dealing heroin, oxycodone, and marijuana. Just very recently, dozens of other sorry excuses for cops in Fresno have been arrested and are serving jail time for all types of corruption charges. All of this corruption occurred under one man, Fresno, California's very own police chief, Jerry Dyer. Speaking of Jerry Dyer, back on November 9th of 2004, Jerry Dyer suspended Jose Morales from the police force over some sort of supposed violation. After working out in his garage with his 13-year-old son and feeling that this was unjust, Morales confronted Dyer at his home about the matter. This would be the last time anyone would see Morales alive, as he would be found dead in a field across from Dyer's home. According to the news reports, an anonymous driver pulled over on the side of the road and found Morales lying face down near a truck, with what was believed to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the chest. This incident took place around the same time as his confrontation with Dyer. This case was ruled as a suicide. But Jose's family didn't believe that this really was a suicide, so they decided to expose the police chief in court in an attempt to sue him. Strangely enough, their attorney for this case would fail to appear at hearings and mysteriously disappeared for about 3 months, which unfortunately resulted in the case being dismissed. After the case was dropped, Jose's wife Yolanda confronted her attorney asking if the police force got to him too, in which he responded with silence. The person that called the police informing about Jose's body remained anonymous and was never identified. And oddly enough, the caller's phone would shut off and not be turned back on after this call was made. Jose's family tried to find evidence through Jose's phone records, but the city of Fresno refused and sued, all in an attempt to keep Jose's cell phone records private. There is obviously more to this story than the Fresno PD would like you to know. And this isn't even including that between the years of 2010 and 2019, there were a total of 189 lawsuits against the Fresno Police Department, which costed them around $18 million in litigation claims. This is just a glimpse into a small window of the Fresno Police Department's dirty deeds. There's so much we could tell you, but for now, let's get back to John.
Sears' great buying power brings you this 3-lux
Camcorder that shoots beautifully, even in low light.
for just $20 a month.
Scotch EG all-purpose video cassettes, L750 or T120, only $4.99.
Inside this compact new video camera is a full-size VHS recorder.
On sale now at all Record Bar outlets.
Over time, John would have enough of the police department's harassment and would take the situation into his own hands, bravely filming and documenting everything that he believed was happening to him. He posted all these videos on his YouTube channel. While most of these recordings aren't exactly concrete evidence, he did manage to catch a few things that are going to give a chill down your spine, given the circumstances. John has caught all sorts of things on his CCTV camera, such as unfamiliar vehicles parking in front of his house again and again, people walking up to his fence and conditioning his dog to the smell of their scent, even a van pulling up in front of his home, holding an expensive camera out the sliding door right at his house. Now let's take a deep dive into some of John's videos on his YouTube channel. The first video John uploads involves a suspicious silver truck that parks in front of his house and then slowly drives off. John claims that this truck belonged to the Fresno Police Department, and after this incident, he received a phone call where the person on the other end immediately hung up.
Your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please check the number and dial again.
John was able to trace this number and claims that this phone number belonged to the Fresno PD. John became obsessively convinced that he was being stalked by the Fresno PD for speaking out against their wrongdoings. Studying his daily camera footage consumed most of the man's time. As you can see in John's second upload, he films a man and his German Shepherd walking down the sidewalk in front of his house. The man stops for a few moments in front of the houses to let John and his neighbor's dog say hi. Now, this could have just been a man out on a walk with his best friend, but John believes otherwise and is suspicious of the man, accusing him of being a member of the local police force. John was under suspicion that the police were letting his and his neighbor's dog get conditioned to their scent, allowing the police to be able to conduct unlawful searches and secretly enter John's residence. Diving into John's third upload, he claims there's a 20-minute gap of lost time in his footage, and you clearly see the video skip with the sun in a different position. The timestamp for this is 17:11:54, and then the video skips to 17:31:02, just a few seconds before John pulls up into his driveway. John stated that this wasn't him editing the tape in any way, and says that this camera was hacked from an outside party. John catches some significant findings in this next video he uploaded to his YouTube channel. John records a black van pulling right in front of his house with a car full of people, while one of them is pointing a camera right at his house, only to drive away moments later. John clearly catches all of this on video. John is starting to catch some really odd footage. Why would a camera crew pull up directly in front of his home, film for a few seconds, and then immediately drive off? John claims that they were using a thermal camera, but many on the internet say it's just a normal, high-end camera. Regardless, why would a stranger be filming his home? John mentioned in the description of this video that these were the same Fresno officers who have been trying to enter his home while he's not there.
A man started pounding on our back door. He almost got in. My oldest daughter pushed the brink of panic button. The man stopped and ran away.
In a world you can't always trust, there's one name you can.
Help avoid break-ins.
Put brakes in.
Here's another disturbing one, recorded on April 11th of 2015. In the video, you see John and his neighbor having a conversation, when John suddenly jumps the fence. But reading the video description, John paints a very dark picture of this video. John was invited over to his neighbor's house, George and Maxine Ramirez. Being a good neighbor, John obliged for a visit. But after an hour and a half, John got extremely uncomfortable out of nowhere, politely gets up, and comes up with the excuse that he was missing his wallet in order to get back home. But for some strange reason, his neighbors responded in protest, with Maxine blocking John's path to the exit to the door and telling him he can't leave. John politely asked her to not block his exit back home, but when this didn't work, John knew he had to act, and his fight or flight response kicked in. John made his way outside and to his neighbor's front gate, with the couple yelling his name the whole time. He tried to leave his neighbor's yard, but George kept blocking his way out. With George being a heavy-set man and a Vietnam veteran, John was a little nervous and ended up jumping the fence in order to get back to the safety of his own property. After this disturbing event, John finally gets home and realizes some of his stuff has been tampered with. His front door lock, printer, and 2 of his computers. There's no audio in his video here, but John says the whole time his neighbors kept yelling his name. He didn't realize this at the time, but he thought it was a possibility that George and Maxine Ramirez were alerting whoever was illegally inside his house. John also states in the description of this video that George is a convicted sex offender. We decided to do some internet sleuthing, and we found out that there really is a man named George Ramirez that's a registered sex offender in the city of Fresno. He got in trouble for lewd acts with a child under 14 years of age, so that statement appears to possibly be very true. He's now under a different address, but the name, weight, and date of birth add up. The man is old enough to be a veteran from the Vietnam War, like John stated, and the man is heavy-set, like John said as well. But why the different address? Could they have possibly moved because of the video evidence of him blocking a soon-to-be dead man's path back to his own house? I know I would want to get out of Dodge. Now, keep in mind that we cannot verify anything we're about to say on the situation, but through his digging, John claimed that the man who illegally entered his home went by the fake name Eli Ramirez, and that this man was working with the Fresno PD, as well as George and Maxine Ramirez. He's claimed to also see this Eli Ramirez in his marine repair shop to get a motor fixed, and that Eli had a young German Shepherd in the back of his truck. This seems kind of odd, considering that in one of John's previous uploads, the man he claimed was conditioning his dogs also had a German Shepherd. Again, we cannot verify any of this. This is just John's story. On May 12th of 2015, just 2 weeks after John filed his formal complaint to the Internal Affairs Department, John catches on his security cameras 3 police vehicles that pull up directly in front of his house. 6 police personnel get out to stand there in front of his property. You would think at this point that John would be gaining some kind of reputation with the police force for being a bit paranoid, and that the police wouldn't want to feed into John's delusion. But they pull up in what seems like an attempt to intimidate John. There have been other incidents of cops doing this very same thing when people speak out against them. John would continue his paranoid postings from his CCTV footage on YouTube, in constant fear of being stalked. But his next video would sadly be his last, and the events that follow up, they're quite shocking. John would post his last video on his Facebook page and YouTube channel. The post reads, "If I turn up missing or dead tomorrow, remember this van. I think I've seen a couple of guys sneak out of the side door and into the building when it was parked in the carport this afternoon. I've been causing the city of Fresno a lot of problems recently, which I now regret. The sign on the door said, 'Guarantee carpet cleaning of Fresno.'" In the video, you can see a carpet cleaning van parked at his neighbor's house. You can see a gentleman outside of the van smoking a cigarette, talking to the driver. Studying the video, you can clearly see the man takes a couple of glances at John's house. Posting this video is clearly evidence of a paranoid sick man. Or is it? What if I told you Guarantee Carpet Cleaning wasn't even a real company? That's right, I can guarantee that this isn't even a real business. Searching the business and all the van's details leads you nowhere. A lot of people on the internet have tried to find details regarding this company, but come up with nothing. There was a Yelp page that was created shortly after John's death. Strangely enough, the Yelp page got its first and only 5-star review just 5 days after John's passing. On January 15th, John would post this disturbing message on ABC 30's Corin Hoggard's Facebook page. "Corin, you want some news? Corrupt Fresno cops are gonna try to kill me this weekend, possibly tonight. This is no joke. Please follow up on my story regardless of what happens or what version the cops and the Fresno Bee come up with." At this point, John was understandably very freaked out. Later that following night, he posted to Facebook yet again, asking any legal gun owners to come stay the night with him. He posted this net-chilling message on his Facebook page. "Anyone want to crash at my pad tonight? Must be a legal gun owner. I think the bad guys may come and get me tonight." Just a few days later, on Wednesday, January 20th of 2016 at 3 p.m., John's neighbors saw that there was smoke coming from inside John's home. They immediately flagged down the fire department, which just so happened to be a few doors down on a different call. They had to break through John's front gate that you've seen in his videos, but when they got to the front doors, they noticed that every entrance was barricaded shut, so this impeded the firefighters' rescue time. But once they did manage to break open one of the barricades through the side door, they found John in the back of his house, unconscious and bleeding out on the floor. John had no pulse, and they were performing CPR on him the whole way out of his house and on the way to the hospital. Unfortunately, he would be pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. When investigators first searched the scene, they initially thought that John's death was very suspicious and that someone had intentionally set his house on fire. Investigators also came across some odd things in John's home. For one, John's home was extremely unorganized and his things were everywhere throughout the house, as well as finding a mattress that had a small amount of blood on it. Every entrance to his home was barricaded from the inside by 2x4s, and this is what made it so difficult for the fire department to get inside, and it was hard for them to get through even with axes. Speaking of the fire department, it is a bit strange that investigators reported that the outside cameras quit recording right before the fire department arrived at the scene. Not only that, but his inside cameras also stopped working the day beforehand. The news and the police department claimed that when they reviewed the inside camera footage, John was sitting in his living room holding a knife before showing said knife to the camera, and then walking into another room with it. Shortly after this, John would make his way back into the living room and proceed to turn the camera off. But as far as we can find, this footage has not been released to the public. The investigators ended up ruling John's death as a suicide. But the autopsy report concluded that John had 3 major puncture wounds to his chest from a knife. After realizing John had been stabbed in the chest, investigators would bring 2 knives from his home to see if any of these were used in John's tragic death. One knife was a Japanese kitchen knife, while the other one was a serrated bread knife. It's strange that there was a bread knife, as that is a very odd choice to commit suicide or murder someone with. Another strange thing is that the black t-shirt he was found wearing was completely fine, with no tears or holes from the stabbing on it whatsoever. They determined his death was due to breathing in carbon monoxide and smoke from the fire, even though the man had 3 serious stab wounds through his chest. A lot of people claim that John may have been schizophrenic or had a drug problem, but the toxicology reports concluded that he had no drugs or alcohol in his system at all. As for the schizophrenia, people with this illness will have a smaller temporal lobe, which is the part of the brain that hears sounds. But John's autopsy report says that his brain was looking pretty normal. But at the end of the day, it is very strange how John predicted his own death and in the manner that he died. What do you think? Do you think that this was just a case of a simply paranoid man, far into his delusions? Or was this the case of a man being stalked by his local police force? Regardless, there's definitely some strange stuff going on with this case that is hard to ignore and shouldn't be forgotten. Maybe John was paranoid, but I think that paranoia is what led him to uncover a darker truth going on behind the scenes. At the end of the day, there was a man here that was reaching out for help, whether he was mentally ill or actually a victim of the Fresno Police Department. There was still a man asking for help, in which he would never receive any, leading up to this unfortunate outcome. There's obviously a lot that the Fresno Police Department is hiding, and their corruption runs deep. And the man that was in charge of the police force at the time, Jerry Dyer, now has the entire city in his hands, being elected the mayor of Fresno in January of 2021. We did not make this video to instill fear in you. Just wanted to show the corruption of this sick and evil world. Just ask yourself, what's your local police force up to? We at Black Sheep Travels hope the best for John Lang's family, and we pray that John rests in peace.